Welcome to My Forever Home, the podcast. I'm Frances Cosway and I've helped hundreds of people create forever homes. I know firsthand how different it is creating a forever home rather than a house you plan to flip in a few years' time. I believe your forever home should reflect what you love and suit your lifestyle rather than being about trends and resale value. You're creating a home for you and your family, not anyone else. So I'm here to help and guide you along the way. I'm going to share all there is to know about creating a quality forever home that's functional, sustainable, future-proof and adaptable to your family's changing needs so it's multi-generational. We don't do cheap and nasty here. We're about creating things to last. It is your forever home after all. I want to help you gain the knowledge you need to be planned and prepared to create the forever home of your dreams. I can't wait to share the journey with you, so let's start. Hello and welcome to this episode of My Forever Home, the podcast. I'm Frances Cosway, your host. I'm an experienced interior designer with my business White Pebble Interiors. And today I wanted to talk to you about design mistakes. I've seen lots of things online and I hear people talk about it a lot, people in the industry, that, having an interior designer means that you're going to mitigate and prevent costly mistakes. But when I was actually thinking about it, it's, what does that actually mean for you? So how do you put that into context in terms of, what design mistakes are you talking about? Because let's face it, if you don't know what you don't know, what does an expensive design mistake mean to me in my home? So you've probably also heard about these design mistakes that can happen. And it's a statement. And so what I wanted to do today was actually make this real for you and really give you real life examples of how that can actually play out. What sort of mistakes are we talking about? And what does it mean for you and your home when it's finished if you do go down the path of perhaps doing it yourself or not having someone that's got the expertise that can really mitigate and guide you away from making these expensive design mistakes. And the other thing I wanted to talk about today was, what is the cost to you? Because sometimes it's not just financial. And I do hear people homeowners say, well, maybe I'm going to do it myself and I think that I can do it myself and I'm going to save money by not using an interior designer because of their fee. And of course that varies across the board. But then it's the other side of that. What's the opportunity cost? Not only is it going to mean a lot of time that you're going to need to put in the project, so what would your hourly rate be? What's the opportunity cost, that trade-off? And I was talking to a client very recently about that exact thing. She said, I can go out and earn the money in my area of expertise so that I can then pay someone like yourself to be able to do a job not only much better than I can do, but that, I can then, it means I don't have to spend my time doing that. I could actually be out earning money to pay for you and leaving it to an expert. But so it's not just the financial cost of the mistakes that you may make. It may be that you need to pay for something to get it fixed. So that's financial. But it can cost something that may not work functionality wise. That may be the cost. So it's not financial. You may end up with something that doesn't function or work as you wanted it to. Or it could be something that you've got to live with for years. It could be a mistake that can't be retrofitted or fixed. So you're stuck with it. And of course, we're talking about forever homes. So that means then that you got to live with that. That's a big cost. It may even be that the outcome is you really dislike, maybe even hate the outcome, and you've got to live with it because it's impossible to be fixed no matter how much money you throw at it. And then there's disappointment. Disappointment is another one. It's like, oh, wow, I really didn't think that it was going to end up like this. I thought it was going to look different or perform different. So it's the disappointment. That's emotional. That's an emotional cost. That weighs really heavy when you're going to be reminded of that every day because you're living with it every day. And it rests heavy because you've also invested so much of yourself in this process. Whether you've got an interior designer or not, you invest so much to get it how you need it to be. The interior designer is there to guide you, help you, remove a lot of the stress, and also allow you to make informed decisions and lots of other things that I'll go through. So you do invest. You got buy-in in this, financially, emotionally, time-wise, whatever. So that rests heavy when the outcome is really disappointing. So as an interior designer with years of experience, I've seen firsthand how one small mistake can then snowball and it leads to big costs down the line. So today I actually want to walk you through real life examples of mistakes that can happen and how you can prevent them. And also how we help our clients make informed decisions that fit their needs so that they are preventing these mistakes happening. And I want to actually play that out for you too so that you can understand how it works when you do work with a designer, but also some of the mistakes that can happen. So I hope that's really valuable for you. That's what I'm going to get stuck into today. And also I want to highlight some mistakes and how they could have been avoided if it was dealt with in a different way, because I think that's helpful as well. Because when you've got an experienced and knowledgeable designer, they've either heard of or seen or, experienced some things that can happen. So that's what I'm going to share with you. So let's talk about some of the costs first. So there's a financial cost of getting something fixed. It may be that it's got to be replaced, or it may be that it's got to be modified so that it's going to end up how you wanted it to be, not how it perhaps ended up. There's a lot of stress that goes with that though. So there's the financial cost of paying for that, fix, replacement, modification. But there's the stress of having to get it organized, of going down this whole process again and getting it redesigned, or choosing something different, or, engaging a builder and then getting the quotes. Oh my goodness me, that is stressful. You think that you've moved in and it's like, I'm done and dusted, and then these mistakes occur and then you've got to go down this path again. That's financial, as well as the stress that goes with that. I mentioned, I think it was the last episode, it could have been a couple ago, that there was a client that was a builder that actually shared with me a mistake that the building, that the house that they had built had gone through, and that was a $15,000 mistake when they had to add a sink into the walk-in pantry because it had been decided to have the dishwasher in the walk-in pantry, and that was the sole dishwasher in the kitchen pantry space. And they had to have a sink next to the dishwasher. From a practicality, functionality perspective, absolutely you need a sink next to the dishwasher. But can you imagine? They move into the house, they've got their kitchen, they're putting the dishwasher into the pantry, and whatever the situation was that got them to that point, there was no sink there. But can you imagine having a dishwasher without a sink next to it? They've obviously moved in and realised that that is just absolutely not feasible. And so they've paid the $15,000 to rip out the bench, to get it all put in, and to put a sink in, just a sink next to the dishwasher. The sink on its own is not the expensive part. It's actually having to rip out certain parts of that pantry and adding the sink in and pulling out cabinetry to allow for the sink, and it changes the design of the cabinetry underneath the sink. So that is really expensive. But can you imagine for those people moving in and realizing, wow, actually this is a huge functionality flaw that is really affecting our day-to-day living in the house, and then having to spend the money to get that fixed? That rests heavy. Plus you've got the financial cost as well. But then there's other costs, like having to live with a mistake because it's not able to be retrofitted, or it will actually cost a ton to fix, a lot of money. And that's money that you may not have at that time when you've just spent all the money building this forever home. So you've got to live with that mistake. And as I was just saying earlier, you're living with that on a daily basis. There's a reminder there of that mistake. Can you imagine having to look at that mistake every day and how you'd feel? So it affects you emotionally as well. It could be things like colours that don't go together. Whatever colours they are, you walk into that space and you know that they just don't go together. I saw someone online recently who had timber floor clashing with the timber cabinetry that she'd chosen. So she had to either paint the timber cabinetry to make it work with the floor, or she had to start again. It was a custom entertainment unit that had been made. But that's heartbreaking. I saw that and I thought, oh my goodness me, she's spent all that money and just not chosen the right timbers to work together. And she knew it was wrong. She wanted an entertainment unit. And so what had been installed it didn't look right. And she knew that. So the issue is has to paint it to make it work, or she's got to rip it out and start again. But actually in her heart, she wanted a timber one. So even painting it is a huge compromise. But she knew if she left it, it looked terrible, and she knew she had to live with it. That's an expensive mistake. It might not be 15 grand. Actually, it may be 15 grand. Might be 5 or 10 grand. But just that heartache of moving into this brand new thing and then not having it right. It could be things like wrong whites that are used together. We all know there's, you go into Bunnings or, whatever, and you see all the whites available, and not all whites are the same. I had someone, the reason that they're not all the same, just quickly, is because there's either cool undertones or warm undertones. But sometimes people think that white and white, I'm going to choose a white bench top and I've got a white tile with that and I've got my white cabinetry or whatever it is, but not all whites are the same. So it's not safe to choose. Sometimes people feel that they've got a safe option by choosing whites. I'll choose white and white and white, and then I'm safe, I'm done. But not all whites are the same. So I did have someone that wanted to choose all their materials and wanted to use lots of white. And I think she wanted to do that because of what I just said. She felt that it was a safe option. If I just choose all white, I can't go wrong. But a white bench top may not go with the white splashback tile that you've chosen, or the white cabinetry may not go with the white bench top that you've chosen, or the tiles that you've chosen. So do you get my drift? Not all whites are the same. You can't think that that's going to be the safe option. And it doesn't mean that it's all going to work. And I had also tell me, so this is another thing to consider, is I had someone tell me that they had done all the reading. They'd done the training on colour. They were feeling that they were getting the confidence to choose their colours for when she actually got to do choosing the colours for her home. And then she actually shared with me, but you know what, I don't want to mess it up, because I know how critical it is that if I choose the wrong white, it's just going to mess up everything in the home. It's going to feel wrong. So she said, I still think after all that learning and after all my reading, I still think that I need to get a professional to help me to get the right white, because I know that if I get it wrong, it's going to be really terrible. So it comes down to, yes, you can self-learn and so forth, but it's experience and the additional knowledge that can actually make a little bit of that difference. So it seems really simple, and people ask for white color advice online. That's another thing I've seen in a lot of the Facebook groups or whatever. They're like, I'm thinking about choosing a white for my walls. What do you recommend? And I just sit there and think, oh my goodness me, you can't do that. And the reason you can't is because it depends on the colours that are butting up to those walls, maybe cabinetry or tiles or other colours that are right next to the colour of the wall, other colours in the home. But most importantly, so yes, it's the materials butting up to that paint colour on the walls, but it's also the light orientation. Is it facing north, west, east, south? How does it look in real life? Because this is actually what affects the colour. So when you're asking for white colour advice online, or whatever colour it is, but white's the most popular thing. And people say, oh, I love Lexicon Quarter, or I love natural white. Well, that's great. That's working in your home. But it doesn't mean it's going to work with someone else's home. When I sold a property that I did up a few years ago, I had a lot of compliments on the colour that we used. And I had a lot of people ask me, what colour did you use? And I said to them, I'm actually a little bit hesitant to tell you, not because I want to keep it a secret, but because I don't want you to actually go and paint your house this colour and you think it's going to end up the same. And it's a really tricky colour anyway, and it did work in the house that I had it in, and it looked amazing, and it was soft because it wasn't a pure white. And I've tried to use that white with other clients, with clients, that was my own home, and it's a disaster. It just threw so much pink. And so I said to people, I'm hesitant to give you the colour that I used because it may not work in your home. You need to go and, get swatches and try it in different light. And I always say to clients too, try the white, try the colour that you want to paint on your walls, on different walls within the room, because the way the light hits it at different times of day will change too. It'll look different in the corners than what it does, on the main part of the wall. So you can't get white colour advice online for those reasons. But sometimes people feel that's possible. The final thing on this, trying to get advice online about colours is, particularly when you're painting a house, that is a big investment. So can you imagine spending, let's say $50K? I'm not saying that a house costs $50K to paint. Sometimes depends on lots of different things. But let's say you're going to spend $50K to paint your house. One colour, some sort of variation of white. And you move in and you know it's wrong. That's such an expensive mistake. But you know how easy it would be to go to a designer and ask them for colour advice to get the right white or to get the right colour within the space. It's not that much of an investment when you're going to be spending such a big amount on something, and that's just one example. You're actually making sure that you're not going to make this big expensive mistake. So that's a big expensive mistake. Just as simple as paint. So yes, mistakes can happen, but we can help prevent them, we being interior designers. So it's easy to get excited about your dream home. You get excited about choosing everything for yourself. You may be that person that's got a really big interest in doing the house themselves. You need to be very confident that you have the skill set and the time available to do the research and to get into the detail, because that's what it's going to take. But design advice is not just about materials and colours. That's another thing that is often a perception about, and I think that's what I talked about in the last episode, around, interior designers as, we're colours and shapes. It's not just about material and colours, and that's one thing that can go wrong. But the right design expertise is to prevent functional design mistakes. So a poorly planned space, a bad design layout that you can't fix. And you're not an expert, so don't expect that you will be able to fix a bad layout of a bathroom design, for example. People come to me saying, oh, we've got this really bad layout in the bathroom. We know it's not right, but we don't know how to fix it. And the first thing I say, well, don't expect that you can fix it. That's not your area of expertise. So don't be so hard on yourself with regards to that. But working with a client recently, we saved her from a big functional design mistake before she even started building. So this is when issues should be picked up, by the way. It should be on paper, not at the build site, particularly with a new build. There's already going to be things that you're not going to be able to predict that might go wrong. So this is an example of, from a functionality perspective, that was just not going to work. And because we had a relationship with her, we knew the things that were important for her. And one of them was a lot of storage in the kitchen. Very specifically, she'd already said she wanted overhead storage. So, but the thing was that the problem that we faced was she had a very big picture window in the kitchen. She lived in a setting that was going to give her a really nice vista. So that's important. But she also wanted the overhead cabinetry, and with a very large picture window, it was impossible to put cabinetry above the window, and it would have affected being able to put cabinetry on either side of the window because it would have had that boxed in effect, and that would have looked wrong as well. So actually that big picture window meant that she couldn't have cabinetry along that wall at all. That wasn't what she had in her mind. It was definitely not what she had in her mind because she didn't understand the implications of the picture window. So because we were working with her, we were able to explain the issue and the options, because there was no right or wrong here. But what my objective was to give her the information and the options so that she could then make an informed decision. So option one was she could keep the picture window and then not have any overhead cabinetry. And we also talked about the fact that maybe she didn't need it. Let's work out all the things that she needed to store, and then we could work out whether all the other cabinetry in the pantry and the kitchen was going to be sufficient so that that overhead cabinetry on that wall where the window was not needed. So that was an exercise that we could undertake to determine whether it was necessary or not. So that means she could keep the window, or the alternative was, no, I really need that additional cabinetry, or I really want that overhead cabinetry, accessibility and everything else. So that meant that she would need to change the window shape. It didn't mean she needed to eradicate it, but it needed to be low enough that we could actually get overhead cabinetry above it. That's actually what she decided. But can you imagine if she was on site, the windows are in, or the windows are framed out at least, because that happens relatively early on, and then she sees that she can't have the cabinetry there. That's the light bulb moment on site. So what she would have lived with was either massive disappointment, huge disappointment that she didn't get the overhead cabinetry that she wanted, or she would have lived with the cost of having to reframe the window and change the window specifications. And who knows, they may have been coming from Germany and had already been ordered because they were off the floor plan. Off the plans, I should say. So they are big implications that we were able to mitigate really early on at floor plan stage when we're doing the elevations and so forth, to educate, inform, walk through options so that she was able to make an informed decision. So what did she end up doing? She ended up changing the window size, and we ended up doing overhead cabinetry for her. So that is where we actually mitigated a mistake that stopped her wasting a lot of money or living with a really, really big design issue for her. So the goal though for me was she was able, and this is where I get so much joy out of what I do, this is where she was able to make an informed decision. That's what made me feel so happy, that we were able to highlight it to her, show her the implications, and then she could make a very informed decision about what the outcome was going to be for her. The other example I'll give you, I just feel that real life examples really help explain the things that you can mitigate or the expense you'll need to go to. So the other example I have is a client that we work with in New South Wales on a little island. And this client had one family bathroom, and she had 2 boys. So there was 4 people using this bathroom, and it was driving her absolutely nuts because it was small and it was really badly designed. She wanted storage. She had no storage. And so the big issue, so I suppose it's a little bit similar but different as well. The way it had been designed, so that the current bathroom had no overhead storage. And you know by listening to me how much I advocate for overhead storage at eye height in a bathroom, because it's just storage gold, easily accessible and all the rest. So she didn't have any of that, and she had a tiny little vanity. So not only did we redesign the layout of the bathroom so she could get a bigger shower, but the goal was to get a bigger vanity and to increase storage. So we had a conversation with her early on to say, are you open to us changing the window so that we can get more storage? And look, not everyone wants to do that. It's an additional cost. It may mean that you've got to go to counsel. It may trigger things. So, of course, we ask these questions first. What's your appetite for that? She said, absolutely, go for it. I want more storage. So whatever you need to do to get more storage in, I'm open to it. So instead of having the window, which is where it was at eye height, which is exactly why she didn't have any storage at eye height, because the window was there, we then moved the window up. So it was a highlight window. So she still got the benefit of having natural light coming into the bathroom. And it didn't really matter whether it was at eye height or as a highlight window up above. It was effectively the same size window. In fact, we made it a little bit longer. And the other beautiful thing about having that highlight window is when she's in the shower, she can actually see the sky. And that's a really lovely thing. But that wasn't the objective. The objective was to maximize her storage. So we moved the window up, and that meant we had all of that wall space at eye height to be able to give her the cabinetry, the shaving cabinet at eye height. So because we were able to have that conversation, and I suppose similar to the other one I was talking about with the picture window in the kitchen, is the conversation around, what's going to give you the best outcome. Are you open to, again, making informed decisions? So with her, we were able to say, if you allow us to move the window, you will get this, this, and this. And she's like, yeah, let's do it. There's no right or wrong here, though. If she had have said, look, I don't really want the expense of moving the window, then we'd explain to her what the implication was going to be. Sure, we may have been able to come up with other options that would give her more storage, but it wouldn't have maximised the storage benefit that she would have got. So I thought it might be a little bit helpful then to talk about the approach when you're working with an interior designer. Now, I'm going to talk obviously a little bit more about how we do it, so that you can understand then how all this plays out and how we have the information to be able to guide, advise, and help you mitigate these mistakes. We need to understand so much from you, about you, and really understand your lifestyle and family situation and all of these sorts of things, so that we know then what is going to be a problem. So again, this is not just about colors and materials and things like that. That's one area, but it's the functionality and living with things that don't work is another part. So we need to understand a lot. So the way I approach it with at White Pebble is we do a deep dive, and I call it a deep dive, and it's to understand the requirements that you have for each room. It doesn't mean you need to solve the problem. It doesn't mean that you need to come up with design ideas or solutions. That's our task. But we need to understand what your requirements are, so we know the questions to ask that are going to impact the design. And this is where we really get to understand your family lifestyle, how you want to use the space, how you anticipate using the space, all based on the questions that we ask you, and what your day-to-day life looks like. So it isn't about choosing the pretty colours, it's about understanding how you need and want to use the space. Are you big entertainers, for example? Do you need a large kitchen island for family meals or hosting guests? Pardon me, it could be as simple as a preference for having a breakfast bar with stools, or you actually would prefer to sit at chairs. Or, if you've got this idea around, I really want to be able to have my cookbooks in the kitchen versus, in a bookcase in the living room. How many appliances do you need? Are they going to be stored underneath? Are they going to be stored on the bench? Are they going to go in the pantry, or would you prefer them to go in the kitchen? All of these things give us a really big insight into how things are going to be working in that space. And with that information, we can then start creating the design. So just to give you an example, we were working with a client on their mudroom. And of course, a mudroom is not just a whole lot of cabinetry that you think, oh, well, I'll just stuff a whole lot of cabinetry in there and I might have a bench seat. That's not creating a bespoke design. That is what I call putting a whole lot of cabinetry in to fill a void. It's not actually thought out cabinetry. It's not actually thought out design. It's just we'll stick a whole lot of stuff in there and we'll work out how we're going to use it later. That's reverse. That's not designing for you. That is just sticking a whole lot of stuff in. So with this particular mudroom, we had conversations and we asked the questions, and then that drove further conversation and discussion around how that space was going to be used and what would be helpful and what is not really needed. And if we don't pose those questions to you around, do you think having a drawer for your dog leads and your dog food and everything else would be helpful? Well, if you're not going to be posed those questions, how are you even going to know that that's going to work for you? So with this particular mudroom, we decided, or the client decided, that having a cupboard for each, there were 2 boys in this home, would be really helpful. That was a cupboard that was able to have stuff in there or laid out for each child, so they could choose adjustable shelves, and we made it all adjustable, so as they got older or as they even became an adult, that some of the adults want some of these as well, by the way. It's not just for kids. If we've got enough space, we'll actually have a cupboard for everyone in the house. But it means then that you can customize the internals of that how you need them to be. We sort of have a few things in there that are quite standard. You might have places to charge. You might have a pull-out shelf that you can put certain things on there and you can pull it out and see easily. Might be that you want some shelves for shoes. You might want a drawer for shoes instead. You might want a drawer, as I was saying, for all the dog provisions. Hooks for bags, or maybe it's hooks for coats, or maybe it's hooks for other things that you may want. But what sort of things are going to be stored would then might determine what the material is at the back so it doesn't get damaged. But this mudroom also we positioned really close to a bathroom, so a downstairs, let's call it a powder room that had a shower, because the kids would then come in and be able to shower when they come in from the pool. But also teenage boys, they've just been playing school sport or even weekend sport. She wanted them to come in through the back entrance, not through the front door, so they could drop their bags in the mudroom and go next door and then be able to shower before they even came into the house. So this was all very, very considered design and crafted so that everything had a place in that mudroom and they didn't bring it inside. Works a treat, by the way. It works. We also created drawers for her husband's runners. He's a big runner, so he has lots of pairs of runners. She said, I don't want to see that. I want him to have his own drawer. So we created a drawer just for his runners. We had shelves in the little cupboards for the kids for their laptops. We had a charging station. So that was really bespoke. In the same house, she was very, very specific around her laundry requirements, again, because we were asking the questions. She didn't realise that, there's a solution for this, there's a solution for that. So she was very specific about washing, dirty washing baskets. Do you know how many laundry designs I see that don't even have a provision for a dirty washing basket? And then when I actually say, I didn't even realise, because it's such a, I suppose in a bog standard, what I would call a bog standard design, I'm sort of a little bit direct here, but a bog standard design, that's not even a consideration. Let's just have a washing machine and a dryer and a broom cupboard. That would be the most basic of the basic, but I see it all the time. Anyway, I digress. For this particular client, because we were asking the questions, she was able to then say, I really want, and she had the space for this, which, comes into consideration as well. I really want to be able to have a washing basket for lights and darks. It's fairly standard. But she said, I want a separate washing basket for my husband's, running stuff. I don't want to have, he can wash that separately. I don't want to have a bar of all that washing stuff, all that smelly running gear. That's his basket. He can deal with that himself. I don't want to touch it. So how awesome was it that we were able to design something so bespoke for her that she didn't even have to touch her husband's washing because we had a separate basket for it. And then she also wanted a separate basket for her hand washing so it didn't ever get mixed up with the lights and the darks and the husband's running gear. She could have a separate one. Then we talked about, what's going to be the best solution for your ironing board, and what sort of vacuum cleaner do you have? What do we need to provision for that? Where does the PowerPoint need to go for that? Detailed to make it so designed around the very specific requirements of what you have or what you may have. So no more, but can you imagine if she had have moved into her house and how frustrated she would have been to be living in a laundry design that was actually really similar to what she'd come from, that it wasn't really designed around what her dream laundry layout would be or consideration for. And because we were asking the questions, we could design it around what was going to really make it so much easier for her and a more pleasant experience, let's say. So that was, a big tick on getting a design outcome that was really going to work. But if you need to be working with someone that's asking the right questions so they can design around these specific things. If you're not getting asked, that's alarm bells for me. Then there's that focus on functionality. So that's always a priority for me. A design might look great, but if it doesn't work for the people living with it, then it's not actually serving its purpose. And this is why we focus on layout, space planning, ensuring that the flow throughout the home is going to work for every person that lives in that home. From the kitchen to the living room to the bedrooms, it's about asking those questions so that we can get the functionality right in each of those spaces, right down to wardrobes, lineal hanging space versus folded clothing versus what goes in drawers. It's not just moving into a wardrobe and going, oh yeah, here's a whole lot of hanging rails. Well, that might not be how you want to store your clothing. So another example is when we were looking at a floor plan for a client, and there we created a bar area adjoined to the kitchen rather than what was proposed by the architect, which was an open open desk space that you see in what I would suggest are more project homes. Here's a little bit of space. It's sort of at the edge of the kitchen. We'll just sort of put a desk space in there and people can use it as a dumping zone. Well, I wouldn't want to have a dumping zone in the middle of my kitchen because that's just going to be exactly that, a dumping zone full of just junk that you've got to look at all the time. So we suggested to her, rather than having this desk space that I didn't feel was ever going to be used as a desk, it was going to end up being a dumping zone. I said, can you imagine having your laptop there or your mobile there and actually doing anything there? No. Okay, let's create something else. So we suggested to her that we could have, make that a bar area with doors that retracted right back so it could be exposed, beautiful glasses, beautiful smoke mirror behind. She was able to put a little bar fridge in there, and then all her spirits and so forth. But when they weren't using it, they could close the doors and it looked like it was part of the kitchen. It was just all this one wall of cabinetry. So for me, that's creating far superior functionality by asking the right questions and proposing different things that spaces can be, rather than, and challenging what's there and challenging what the use of things that may be proposed could be, and actually coming up with something that's a lot more useful. I know for a fact that she's using that bar far more than what she would ever have used a desk, and clutter was going to drive her insane, and particularly with teenagers, that was absolutely going to be a dumping zone. So that's where we're creating alternative, challenging the status quo to get better functional design. And I feel that if you're not getting someone on board that is able to challenge, that you're wanting them to challenge, really move against the status quo, then you're not getting someone that's going to be working super hard on getting the right outcome for you. The next one I'm really passionate about, and that is around educating clients so that they can make an informed decision. And I already talked about that quite a lot with some of the examples that I was giving you around what are some of the options that are available, in particular spaces, like the picture window, like moving the window, even like the bar area I've just explained, that educating on what alternatives are. How can you possibly make an informed decision if you don't understand what the options are? But also understanding the advantages and disadvantages of different options, and that's materials, it's layout, it's everything. And that for me is such a big driver about why I do what I do, is educating clients, because I want them to make informed decisions. I want clients to know what the options are, the advantages and disadvantages of each of those, so they can make an informed decision. So when they move in, when it's all done, they say they know, they're so conscious of that very specific decision that they made, rather than the if only, or, oh, if we had have known, then we would have done this. No, that was an informed decision. You understood maybe what the compromises were of each, and then you were able to make the right decision for you. Just like the lady with the picture window, she knew the impact of each of the decisions, cabinetry or no cabinetry, picture window, no cabinetry, or cabinetry, no picture window. But she made the right decision for her, because we're able to go through the advantages and disadvantages. But we want you to understand the reasoning behind the design choice so that you can make that informed decision. Could be why certain materials work better for your lifestyle. It might be that you want no maintenance with some of your materials. It could be the bench top or the floors, or ease of cleaning. So, okay, you've got this option, which means you'll have this, this, and this, or you've got this other option, which is going to give you this, this, and this. Or why a specific layout is going to improve the flow of a space. And so it might mean, for example, that we can increase and make a space feel larger, but it might mean that there's a compromise in another element of that space to do that. But we never just tell clients what to do. We explain why something will be what it's going to be based on your needs and your design goals, because of these conversations and these deep dives and so forth. Just another example on that is, I suppose it's the flip of the mudroom that I was just talking to you about. We had a client that the architect had put in a truckload of cupboards in the laundry / mudroom, but there was no real function. It was just a whole heap of storage. So knowing that the client had 3 children, we suggested a locker system for them. I love the locker system. And again, a dedicated cupboard or locker, bit of a, I don't know, just taking that word now that it's a locker system, charging station, hook, shelves, all the things that I was talking about before. But it meant that we redesigned those cupboards so that they were functional. They weren't just, when they moved in, you open the cupboard door and there's just a rail there. What are you going to do with that? How is that going to be functional? Unless you want it to be a cloak cupboard, it's not really going to be functional. But I think because they had a whole wall of cupboards, not only could they have the cloak cupboard, but they still had a cupboard for each person in the home. And we were able to then design that in a way that meant it was specific for each person, or was flexible for each person. And then I also remember last year I went and did a visit with a client who had finished their home. And, I sort of came in and we were looking at the floors and I was commenting on the floors, and she said, "I'll never ever forget what you said to us when we were choosing our materials." And she said, you told us that we should not choose materials for the age of our children, the current age of our children at that time. And I thought, yes, I can remember saying that to them. And I also remember talking about it on multiple episodes of this podcast, that sometimes people feel like they need to choose materials because all they know is the age of their children now. So a 3-year-old is not going to be a 3-year-old for long. So I suppose my point with her was, just because your children are toddlers now, don't choose materials because they are toddlers or they're babies or whatever. And sometimes what happens is people want to choose softer surfaces, for example, because they're worried about their child hitting their head. But those children are going to grow very quickly and they're going to be teenagers. You're not going to need to be worrying about them hitting their head anymore. So don't choose materials just for the age that your children are now, because it will change. But that was a really lovely thing that she said. And that's obviously knowledge that we pass on to you. And that's what we were able to pass on to her, so that she wasn't choosing materials for that current moment in time of her life that was going to change very, very rapidly. And then it's creating a design based on your needs. So understanding your preferences, functionality needs, lifestyle. We have so many conversations. We really get to know you. And I say so often, I'm going to mention this to you, but I sort of have a feeling that this may not be your thing, but it would be amiss of me not to mention it because I feel it's going to be good for you for these reasons. Certainly not you must choose this. But it's ensuring that the home and the choices for the home are going to stand the test of time and be adaptable, because it's a home you're going to spend a long time in. You know, I use the word forever home, but it doesn't mean you're going to come out of that home in a coffin. It just means that you're going to be in that home for a long time. 10 plus years is the norm. It's not a short-term home. You're not going to be there the intention is not to flip it. I think the example that I want to use here is actually a client. And we're talking about adaptability. When they came to me, we did a floor plan sanity check, and she had a spare room. It was a spare room, just a spare room downstairs, and she had family come and stay maybe once a year, maybe once every couple of years, and they might be there 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And my suggestion was that would be a room that wouldn't be used for a really big chunk of the year. And she had teenage children, and she had a husband that worked from home a lot. She did, bits and pieces at home as well. And I suggested then, and it had a hinge door on this spare room. And I suggested, why don't we make this a multifunctional room? Why don't we make this a space that we have 2 sliding doors so we can open up the space that can still be closed, so we can still create privacy for when your relatives do come and stay. So we can shut the doors. But for the month that they're not there, every 48 months, 24 months, I should say, I'm getting ahead of myself. Why don't we enable the doors to be open? We put a sofa in there that can become a sofa bed for when you do have your relatives stay. We can put a desk in there as well, so it can be sort of a study space or a space that her husband can work from home. And he can close the doors as well and have conference calls and be able to have private meetings in there too. So instead of it sort of had flipped from being a study, just a study, and then it had flipped to being a spare room. We were then able to make that a multifunctional space by changing the door type. And then it was able to be a spare room. It was able to be an office, but it was also able to be a living space. So a second living space that they didn't have anywhere else in the home, so that she could use that most of the time as a living area, a place that she could just go and read a book. Maybe her husband was working there, she could go to the other living area, and then when they had people stay, they could close the doors and it could be a spare room. They also had built-in cabinetry, robe space in there too. So just being able to explore what are the needs, challenging, asking the questions, we were able to create a space that was more hardworking than what it would have been if it just had a sole function. And I feel that it's my job to really ask questions and challenge, what are these spaces going to be used for? Someone rang me this week and they said, we've been listening to your podcast and we were going to have 2 spare rooms in our home when our children come and stay. But now we're going to have one as a spare room and we're going to make the other one multifunctional. Well, that was music to my ears, that just listening to this podcast meant that they had changed the direction of what these spaces were going to be in their homes. Finally, the importance of our proven process. You need to be confident that who you're working with is actually experienced and has the expertise and has a proven process that is going to extrapolate, challenge, and do all the things that I've just explained. So the reason that we're able to help our clients avoid, I suppose, the costly mistakes is because we follow this tried and trusted process around how we can extrapolate information from our clients without it being overbearing. The touch points that we have, the meetings that we have, the questions that we ask, the things that we pose to them so that they can make those informed decisions. It's one that has evolved over the 15 years and it's evolved also from my own personal experience of doing builds and renovations, not only for myself but with my clients, hundreds of homeowners over the last 15 years. So this system has been nuanced and finessed and based on feedback. I'm always asking clients for feedback as well, just to tweak things along the way, so that we're always making sure that we can give the best to our clients to avoid these mistakes. And it enables clients to also focus on one thing at a time to reduce the overwhelm. And sometimes I'll say, oh, shouldn't we be working on this now? Or what about this? It's no. Or we share the process with them anyway when they come on board. So they sort of tick the box as they go along. But it means that working on one thing at a time means that you can focus all your energy on, I just need to make decisions on this right now, and then I know that my designer will actually take me on the journey, and then I'll get to the next thing. Sometimes just minimizing that overwhelm and getting them to focus, I'll sort of pull them up and go, no, we're just looking at this right now, so that you're not actually getting overwhelmed. That's really important too. So my key takeaways for you today are, well, listen back to the mistakes that can happen, the examples that I've given you, but designing a forever home should be a carefully planned journey. It's not one where you make rash decisions just to get it done and off your plate. That is going to be a recipe for disaster, and I do see it happen. I just want to make this decision because I'm sick and tired of looking at these tiles, because we show you a curated selection of materials. You don't have that because it's such a reduced amount of things that we're showing you based on your brief, of course, that you don't end up going down that path. But with the right focus on functionality and the personalized design, you can avoid those costly mistakes that you either have to go and rectify that'll cost you thousands, or, as I said right at the start, you've got to live with. Don't leave it to chance. And the other thing is, the right designer that gets you, that really understands your lifestyle, and is someone that you feel that you can work with, that you can have a real open conversation and relationship with, that's got the experience and expertise, they're going to know the areas for you to avoid, and they're going to know the questions to ask, and they're going to challenge the status quo. If they're not challenging, then that's the absolute least that they should be doing, is challenge. If they're not, that would be an alarm bell for me. They should be challenging what's going on to get you the best outcome. They're batting for you the whole journey. They're in your corner. You wouldn't actually go to Google to self-diagnose. At least you shouldn't be. Maybe some sort of medical concern that you have. You'd go to a doctor. So why risk the thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that you're going to be spending, and put it to chance that I'm pretty confident this might work, or I'm pretty sure this is going to work. If you're not trained or experienced to make these decisions, you need to bring this forever home to life. And isn't it better that you're having someone in your corner that can help you make those right decisions? It's a relief. It's yes, they're not going to let me make a bad decision. There's no way a designer will let you make a bad decision. Well, they shouldn't be. It's funny, I was chatting to a client only yesterday, and she was saying that I'd prefer to go and earn money and then pay someone that knows what they're doing. But she was also sharing that she had a friend of hers that had done 2 renovations. She loved the design process, this friend of hers. Loved going out and wanted to do it all herself. And she said it was chalk and cheese with the 2 renovations. The first renovation, she did it all herself. And she said, my friend was so stressed. She was so over it. She was so done with the whole thing with that first renovation because it was so exhausting. And she didn't actually realize how many choices and things she had to go and research and decide on. And every weekend she was at shops trying to find things. Versus the second time, because she knew how taxing it was and how time consuming it was, the next time she did actually engage a designer, and she said to me that not only was her friend not as stressed, she said, I'll never, ever, ever do it again without a designer. But she said the difference in actually the finished product was quite remarkable. She said it felt more polished. And what I mean by that is not posh or out of reach. It just felt a little bit more finished. It just felt a little bit more refined because she had an expert helping her with things that she may have not even thought of. So that was really interesting hearing that from her. And she said, and I think that was another reason why I ended up getting a designer. Seeing my friend go through those two experiences, I certainly knew the experience that I wanted to have after looking at her and hearing her with her experiences of one with and one without a designer. It makes a difference. But thank you for tuning in. I hope that I've been able to share some of the mistakes. So rather than you reading or hearing about, oh yeah, having a designer is going to avoid mistakes, I really wanted to share what some of those mistakes can be and that it's not just a financial mistake. I wanted to share those with you, but I also wanted to share with you what the journey should be like so that you know how you're going to avoid those things as well, that having someone to guide you how you avoid the mistakes that I sort of shared with you and what the alternative can actually be. So stay tuned for more episodes and tips, and until next time, take care and happy designing. Bye for now. If you're ready to renovate or build your forever home, you're in the right place. Here are some ways to gain further inspiration or how we can work together. Book a chat with me so we can discuss your project in more detail and see how we may be able to assist you with one of our fixed price packages. You can book a chat with me directly at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au/chat. If you're after some peace of mind that your floor plan is as good as it can be, for a small investment, a floor plan sanity check could be just what you need. I review your plans as that second set of professional eyes, ensuring it's functional, flexible, and future-proof for lasting peace of mind. This can save you thousands in structural changes down the track. You can find out more and book directly at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au. And if you'd like to get your hands on some reading material, unlock your dream home and dive into our first ever magazine, Creating Your Forever Home. It's packed with expert insights, stunning visuals, and practical advice on building your forever home. Grab your copy and be inspired now. You can also access the first 3 chapters of my book, Your Forever Home, a practical and helpful guide to gain insights on how to create a home that will suit your needs for the long term. Everything is available at whitepebbleinteriors.com.au/links. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of My Forever Home. If you loved it, please leave a review, share it on Facebook and Instagram for your friends, and be sure to sign up to our newsletter for more insights on creating the forever home of your dreams. If you're really ready to get started, you can book a chat with me via the website whitepebbleinteriors.com.au or check out our online courses designed to provide a clear framework for you at myforeverhome.com. If you've got a question, be sure to get in touch at podcast@myforeverhome.com. Have a great day.